Hello everyone, we are the group 6 and we're going to report about the story of A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. The content of this presentation start with the author's background. Second is the setting, following by the genre, summary, theme, symbolism, point of view, and lastly, the moral lesson. So, to start with the first reporter, which is going to report about the author's background.
The author of A Rose for Emily is William Faulkner. So, let us get to know more about William Faulkner. He was born on September 25, 1897 at New Albany, Mississippi. His family belonged to a once wealthy family of former plantation owners. And just before he was 5, his family moved to Oxford, Mississippi. A few of Faulkner's major works are The Sound and the Fury on 1929, As I Lay Dying on 1930, and Light in August on 1931. Faulkner's writing was particularly interested in exploring the moral implications of history. A Rose for Emily was the first ever short story that Faulkner published in a public magazine. Setting: the story took place in a small town called Jefferson at Mississippi.
Genre: Gothic fiction.
Hello everyone, I am Mary Claire C. Amante. So here's the detailed plot summary of A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. Section 1. Emily Grierson passes away and her funeral is described by the narrator. Emily's house used to be in the middle of an elegant neighborhood, but it has all gone to wreck and ruin. Emily did not pay taxes because the previous mayor had suspended the payments after Emily's father died, as he had donated a large amount of money to the community. As new mayors come and go, they all try to get Emily to pay her taxes, but none are successful. When even members of the board of aldermen come to her door, Emily is adamant that she does not have to pay taxes and asks the men to leave. Section 2. 30 years ago, Emily was investigated because of a strange smell coming from her house. Emily is alone, having been abandoned by her supposed fiancé and her father having passed away. Complaints continue to the point where Judge Stevens, the town's mayor at that time, has lime sprinkled along the foundation of Emily's house at night, unawares to her. The odor does go away eventually. Everyone pities Emily because she is all alone and never goes outside. This is similar to what happened to her great aunt who went insane. Most people in the town think that the Griersons were too proud, and now that has resulted in Emily's having but nobody to marry despite being 30 years old. When Emily's father dies, the women of town come to console Emily. However, she refuses to believe that her father is dead. This keeps up for 3 days until she finally relinquishes her father's body so it can be buried. In Section 3, after her father passes, Emily is ill for a long time. She begins a relationship with Homer Byron, who is constructed to pave the sidewalks of the town. Despite Emily no longer being as reclusive, the town still pities her, because they all believe Emily to be dating someone beneath her. Emily's reputation is tarnished by her relationship with Byron. She purchases arsenic, but does not disclose how she will use it, despite being required to by law. On Section 4, most of the people in the town think that Emily will kill herself with the poison. It seems unlikely that she and Homer will be married, despite the fact that they go out together every Sunday. Some women convince the minister of the town to talk to Emily, but something happens there that makes the minister refuse to return, although he never speaks of it. Emily's cousin arrived from Alabama after being requested by the minister's wife. They come and stay for a long time. It eventually seems as if Homer and Emily will be married. Although Homer is not seen for a while, it is assumed that he is organizing things for the wedding, or that he doesn't want to be around her cousins. The cousins leave and Homer returns, but never emerge from the Grierson home after calling in to visit one night. Emily never leaves her house, growing old and fat. She very rarely talks to anyone, never pays her taxes, and eventually dies of old age. On the last section, section 5, when Emily dies, her house is open for her funeral. The upstairs floor, which Emily had stopped using, has a room upstairs with items for a wedding. The room also has Homer's decayed body on a bed that it appears that Emily slept on as well.
Theme: people should let go of the past, moving on with the present, so that they can prepare to welcome their future.
So these are the symbols of the rose for Emily. The first symbol is the Emily's home, the home that Emily shares with her father and eventually inherits, symbolic of Emily's inner state. The house is vibrant and fresh with clean white walls. Just like Emily's house, she is also vibrant and fresh in her youth, and she is as pure as the walls are clean and white. The house becomes dirty, smelly, and foul, and at the same time, Emily grows older and her spirit more deranged. So, the house of Emily is very important in this story. It is because this is where Emily grows up and where she lives her whole life until she dies. The second symbol is the rose. The story never manifests an actual rose for Emily. However, the title itself is symbolic. The rose represents the idea of love, since young lovers often give each other roses to express their affections. With so many suitors in her youth, it seems inevitable that Emily will accept a rose from one of them, but she never does. After her father dies, she meets Homer. It seems like she may finally have true love. That idea is preserved forever when she kills Homer, her fiancé, just as a rose is preserved between the pages of a memory book, and just as Homer's corpse and her wedding day clothes are presented in the room that she has sealed off in her home. So, when we say rose, we already know that rose is a symbol of love. This is a symbol of showing our affections to one another. So in this story, the rose is not actually the symbol of Emily, because according to the story, Emily never accepts roses just because her father is so strict, and her father didn't want her to entertain any other man in his life. The third symbol is Emily's hair. Emily's hair is the symbol of her sexuality throughout the story. After her father dies, Emily cuts her hair short, appearing like a young girl, though she is in her 30s. Her girlish appearance is a symbol of her sexual immaturity, which now seems destined to be frozen in time, since her father has robbed her so many chances to marry. So, the hair of Emily is very important symbol of this story. It is because after her father dies, she cuts her hair short, showing the appearance of young girl, although she is in her 30s. So, she is just showing her immaturity, knowing that she is old enough and she wanted to be young again just because she never experienced that before. So the last symbol is Emily herself. Emily is a symbol of the old South. She resists change. She writes a letter on a 40-year-old stationery. She refuses to have metallic letters put on her mailbox for new mail delivery service, and continues to insist on handshake agreements she had with Colonel Sartoris, excusing her traditions and makes a living monument out of her home. She symbolizes traditions and a stubborn clinging to the past, no matter what progress or changes occur. So, Emily herself resists change. She don't want change. All she wants is to remain to what she used to do in the past. So she don't want to act upon her age. Instead, she wanted to act just like what she used to do before, like handshaking agreement, of writing and accepting letters. And no matter what progress occurs, she's still clinging to the past that she's still young, vibrant, and fresh. The point of view of the story. So Emily Grierson is a fictional character in a short story entitled The Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. Emily is a spinster living alone in a small Mississippi town with an overbearing and needy father. So the townspeople feel sympathy for her after her father's death and try to cope her with a life alone. So in general, the narrator is sympathetic to Miss Emily, never condemning her actions, sometimes unabashedly and sometimes grudgingly. The narrator admires her ability to use her aristocratic bearing in order to vanquish the members of the city council or to buy poison.
One moral or ethical message of this story is that we don't see the world properly when we view it through rose-colored glasses. This town was able to ignore Emily's oddities because they view her through rose-colored glasses. When Emily's father died, there were signs that she was going crazy. For several days, she refused to let anyone take her father's body away, insisting he wasn't dead. But everyone simply shrugged this off, saying it was part of her grieving process. We don't tend to like to see something bad in people, and we like to imagine that everyone is good and normal, especially if they seem normal from their outward appearances. So everyone left Emily alone. She didn't make it easy for people to befriend her. And the town continued to view her through rose-colored glasses so that they wouldn't need to confront the truth. The town felt bad for her, and so they decided to simply put on the rose-colored glasses and ignore her oddities, even when odd smells started coming from her house. They simply sneaked up to her house one day and surrounded it with lime to hide the smell. When Emily bought arsenic, the worst that the town believed of her was that she was going to commit suicide. Even when she continued to live, they never even imagined that the arsenic couldn't be tied to her. They continued to view her with these rose-colored glasses. The title of this story, A Rose for Emily, also alludes to the rose-colored glasses. The rose given to Emily wasn't a flower, but instead was a rose in the form of rose-colored glasses.